I'm going to talk about stormwater. I'm going to talk about stormwater in trees. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little something I've cooked up over here. And that is what happens with water and stuff that goes in water that becomes stormwater. So I'm going to put this green stuff in. This is actually aquarium glass, and just so you can see it. And then I'm going to put some soil in here as well. Now there's three major components of mineral soil. There's obviously some organics in here as well, but there's sand, silt, and clay. And if you think of a sand particle as the size of a rain barrel, then a silt particle is about the size of a dinner plate, and a clay particle is about the size of a dime. So think about those. I'm going to shake this up, and I'll pass this around if anyone wants to take a drink. So we'll leave that there. Now, if I hold this up, you can start to see the sand or the gravel or sand, large sand, is already settling. And that takes about less than 10 seconds, about 7 seconds. And if you look, you can start to see that there's another fine layer that's already forming right there, and that is the silt particles. And they drop out in about 40 seconds to a minute. And then there's what you're seeing in here is the clay particles primarily. And at the end, we'll see how long it took for this to settle out so the clay particles weren't visible. And there's an important reason for why I'm talking about these particles and what they mean, because they carry, clay particles in particular, they have a high charge, and they carry a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen and other kinds of what we would consider pollutants. And one of the things that we've got going in this urbanized world that we have is we have a lot of runoff, but we treat all of our stormwater as a waste product. We don't treat it as an asset. It's only to convey it and get it out of there as fast as possible. So as an example, a pound of phosphorus, so 16 fluid ounces right there, okay? That produces, if I put that in fresh water body, it'll produce about 500 pounds of algae. That's a lot of algae. So, it's a big chunk right here. 500 pounds for phosphorus, so 1 pound. And then nitrogen, it's particularly good at producing algae in salt water. And it isn't that this doesn't produce it as well, but this is really good at that. And so 1 pound of this will produce about 275 pounds of algae. So that's part of the reason why you hear about the dead zone, the Gulf of Mexico, is because of this stuff, phosphorus and nitrogen. And when it goes down there, when water is in a pipe, the slowest water is ever moving in a pipe is about 1/2 foot per second, which is a fairly good pace. As an example, 5 feet per second, if I'm standing in 5 feet per second of water, 6 inches, it'll knock me over. So 1/2 foot per second, it's never slower than that. And typically pipes are designed for what's called a 10-year, 24-hour storm. That's the typical. It's not that all pipes are designed that way, but when most engineers are sizing their piping system for a system, they're thinking about a 10-year, 24-hour system. So I got a tape measure. So I'm down here from Minneapolis, and the 24 hours, the 1 year, or the 1 inch, the 10-year, 24-hour storm was, up until about 2010, was about 6 inches. So that's 6 inches right there, okay? Now, based on the 30 years of data previously, the 10-year storm has actually grown now to 7 inches. So that's an extra inch of water now in the system, and the pipes were not designed for that. So that's a change. And you're thinking, okay, an inch, that's not very much. It's like when you look at a map of the US and you go, oh, it's only this far from Los Angeles to Dallas. That isn't very far. Well, it's kind of the same thing. Think about it as multiplying up in scales. So, keep an eye on this. It might settle out while I'm turning some slides and you'll miss it, so I want you to pay attention to that, okay? All right? Let's hope you get these. And what I'm going to look at are why you use trees for stormwater management, mechanisms, techniques, research, policy, case studies, and synthesis, and a Q&A. So why use them for stormwater? Well, this is the world we live in right now. So this is 2014. Urban, semi-urban, ex-urban Chicago, but the urban and suburban looks a lot like this. And up in that top left corner, that's 300 years ago, 1714. So 1714, 2014. Now, think about it in terms of, instead of just percentages, if we have 10 drops of rain falling in 1714 throughout most of America, 1714, 10 drops of rain, 5 drops will go in the ground, 4 drops will be tied up in vegetation, et cetera, and 1 drop will run off. Okay, so 1 drop is going to run off. Now look over here. So with this is not a huge amount, 75, well, it's pretty urban. But certainly there's lots of parts of downtown Chicago that are much higher than that. So out of 10 drops of rain that are falling, we're going to have about 3 tied up in vegetation, okay? We're going to have about 1.5 going in the ground, and we're going to have about 5.5 that's running off. See what's happened to the system? We went from 1 drop to 5.5 drops for every single rain event. And this system, this landscape, sized itself for 1 drop of rain coming off. It didn't size itself for this. It obviously has to resize itself. So that's why our channels, our stream channels, have gotten much wider. We see a lot more fluctuation in our lakes and other water bodies when you have a storm. So that's a problem. So this is kind of like, okay, so it's not very far from Los Angeles over here to, Dallas, right there. But again, think about it the way I told you in terms of thinking about it and scaling up. So it's not just linear relationships, it's geometric relationships. So if I go from Los Angeles and I go all the way over to Maine, southern Maine right there, the storm that's called a P storm or a 90% storm, 90% of storms from Los Angeles all the way up to Maine, we take a cross-section right across the country, are between 3/4 of an inch and 1.5 inches across the whole country. That's not just a little bit. And so this is very, very significant that it's that amount. So it's 3/4 of an inch up to 1.5 inches. And that P storm is what generates at least half the water for the year. So remember the 10 drops? So at least half the water for the year is in those small storms. Take that away, okay? Now, this is the part we can use for managing the water in pipes. But our current system is a little different than that, okay? So 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inch, keep that in mind. And you see these places here, these kind of purpley pink places right here, up there in New England, and then over in Seattle. We have 2 ways of handling the storms in the future. So remember that 6-inch, 10-year, 24-hour storm in Minneapolis has now gone to 7 inches, that extra inch. The P storm in Minneapolis is about 1 inch. So 90% of storms are 1 inch or less in a 24-hour period. And that's over, so the 10 drops again, that's over half the rain for the year. It's the same in Chicago, it's over 50% too. So that's the paradigm we've been operating under, which is, let's just make the pipes bigger. Let's put in bigger pipes. Okay, it is a solution. I'm not saying it is the solution, but it is a solution. Or what we can do is keep the pipe that's in the ground and then try to figure out ways to manage the little storms in the green infrastructure. Those 1-inch, 24-hour storms, which again, remember, most of North America is like that. If we take this approach, a 4-foot pipe, reinforced concrete pipe, that's the standard pipe reinforced concrete is the standard structure of these pipes that are going underground. One of those, 1 foot of a pipe so 1 foot long, this wide, 4 feet, that costs about $200 per linear foot. If it's 5 feet wide, it costs about $300 a linear foot. If it's 6 foot wide, it costs about $400 a linear foot. When people are talking to you about the value of green infrastructure, the value of trees, people say, well, you know, how much are those trees? Well, they're $1,000 or $1,800 or whatever it is the install cost. And they're like, God, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Compared to this much pipe, think about that in terms of scale. Because my approach is that this is green infrastructure. And if it's infrastructure, let's treat it like infrastructure. It gets a value. And also, that means that we do what's necessary to get it right. So think about it in terms of, if I want a piping system in our neighborhood, I don't have a meeting like this with all of us gathering together and I pass out the hat, right? Or let's have a bake sale. Let's see if we can get some pipes for a couple of bake sales worth, right? No, we bond it. And I'm proposing that we do the same thing with our green infrastructure. We bond it. So keep that in mind. So again, this is treating it as a waste. This is treating it as an asset, where we're putting it in the ground and we're, in this case, the parking lot, typically the drive lanes are like this. That's where the water is conveyed. But if we tip the drive lanes like this and we put the water over here in the center where the bays are, where the parking bays are, we can absorb the water, we can put trench drains in there, we can put in catch basins, pervious paving, variety of different things. And then we can put a big soil volume in here for the trees to grow big. Again, stormwater as an asset. Okay. So there's 3 major ways that trees take care of water. And we just call it stormwater because that's kind of like the terminology here. So it can intercept it in the canopy, or it can evapotranspire it, like intercepts, goes into the ground, and then is evapotranspired up through the trunk and branches and leaves. And we can put it in the ground. So those are the 3 major ways we can do that. Now this is some research from Greg McPherson. Greg and Dave Noack, I don't know if he's here, were co-authors of the iTree, an excellent system. It's free and online, U.S. Forest Service. Just download it and use it. It's a modeling structure. It's a way to basically figure out values and costs. So if we look at a tree that's in this 5-year age, and what we're looking at in this tree is how much is it intercepting? So how much gets caught up in the canopy? Well, you can see over the course of a year, these are gallons per year, and this is the age of the tree. So when it's a little one, we're looking at a couple of hundred gallons. Now let's go up to 40 years, and that is about 5,500 gallons. So how big is 5,500 gallons? All right, 2 of me, touching hands, that's about 12 feet across, and about my height. Think of a tank that size sitting on a telephone pole. That's basically how much is intercepted per year by a 40-year-old tree in its canopy. Essentially, nothing hits the ground at until a little over 1/4 inch of rain falls on most deciduous trees that we have. Coniferous trees intercept a little more over the course of the year, but it's a 1/4 inch. Doesn't sound like much, but now spread this over a large area. So let's talk about large areas. These things are free, by the way. You can get these from various places. What I'm going to do is I got my little handy-dandy little circle here, and it tells me how much pollution is generated by different kinds of watersheds at different numbers of acres, okay? So I'm going to say, I'm going to look at industrial, and I'm going to look at the 1-inch storm in 1 day, okay? And remember, that's over half the rain for the year, okay? 1-inch storm in 1 day. For 100 acres, not very big area, it produces 1,400 pounds of suspended solids. That's the stuff that's in there. The amount of nitrogen it produces is about 40 pounds. So here's the nitrogen, remember? So one of these produces 275 pounds. Now think about what 40 of these produces in terms of algae, okay? And then phosphorus, just a tish under 5 pounds. So that will be 500 pounds per one of these, and we've got about 5 of them, okay? It's a lot of water, or it's a lot of algae. And that's every storm, okay? And then this is from Greg McPherson. So a 3-inch tree, 3-inch diameter breast height tree, so about here, is not worth 1/10 the value, so I got the 10 again, not 1/10 the value of a 30-inch tree. It's 1/70th the value. So you can see that projection again, things are going geometric. And the bigger the tree gets, at 24 inches and 30 inches, you think, well, there's not that much difference. It's about twice as much interception between a 24-inch canopy tree, a DBH tree, and a 30-inch. So it just keeps on getting bigger really fast. So one of the things I want to talk about in terms of our stormwater system, put another different slide, is this right here. Is the top approach is what we've done since the Second World War in development is we've created a system that's on high alert 24 hours a day, year-round, forever. And the system is designed by engineers to typically have a lifespan in the pipes of about 30 years, okay? About 30 years. And they can last, reinforced concrete pipes can last 100 years, more than 100 years. There's ones in Rome that are still around. I'm not suggesting we make them to last that long, but they can last a long time. Our approach for this has been, like I said, high emergency. So think about it this way. Last night I got a paper cut, and it was a kind of a bad one. It really hurt. So I called 911, and they sent an ambulance out for me, and they took care of my paper cut, so you'd be glad to know that. But there was another guy down the road, and he had a heart attack. That was fine. They got one to him, too. Another guy had stroke. They got one for him. And then another guy had kidney failure, but they told him, sorry, the guy with the paper cut isn't done yet, so we'll send it over to you. That's the way our stormwater system is designed, is to handle every tiny little storm and every gigantic storm. So what happens is all these little storms fall. A lot of times our pipes are half full before our third full, and then we have a big storm come through. So, remember I said the gravel takes about 7 seconds to settle when it's in still water? Can you hear that? Okay, what does that sound like? Do you ever, clean the outside of your house, and I don't know about you, but it's like the stripping thing. The stripping, forget that. I want a sandblaster. I want something that's going to take it off fast. Every time a storm starts and the sand starts moving again at a ½ foot per second, it's sandblasting the inside of that pipe. How long do you think our pipes are going to last? They're certainly not going to last 30 years, and they're definitely not going to last 100 years. So what we want to do is we want to take our soil and we want to put it with our trees, and we want to take clean water and put that in our pipes, because clean water in a pipe is excellent at moving clean water into big surface bodies so that it can spread out and not really cause too much damage. But when there's a lot of this stuff in the center of it, the pipes and joints are getting weakened because of the sandblasting, it's a problem. Remember, I'm the guy that called 911, so take that into account for a paper cut. Does anyone see any relationship between canopy size and soil volume? Now, these trees were all the same, Norway maples, planted the same time from the same nursery. This is in a parking lot in West Germany, or Germany. See any relationship? I take it nobody does, so I figured it was just me, but I wanted to check. Well, this is a tree that has been planted, it's been in for 5 years, honey locust, and when it came to the site, you can probably imagine that the landscape architecture guy like me didn't accept it with all those leaves missing off of it. When it came from the nursery, it was full. All of these branches had leaves on them. 5 years later, inside this volume right here, this tree is basically self-pruning itself. It's basically bringing the amount of canopy back that it can support with this amount of soil volume right here. And between here and here, you think, oh man, it could get in there. Look, it could really grow. This is compacted material right in there. So I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. So, it's not looking too good for that tree. Well, research has shown that there's a ratio of about 1 foot of canopy, 1 square foot of canopy, or 1 unit in the air, 2 units in the ground. That's if I'm trying to grow it right here in the middle of the room, okay? So 2 cubic units of soil supports about 1 square foot of canopy, okay? If you're meters, whichever, it doesn't matter, but you can see that relationship. That's if I'm trying to grow right there. Now, if it's borrowing soil in other volumes, we don't have much information on that, but it probably is less than that. So we have a tree. Most trees in urban areas are spread out about 30 feet on center. That canopy will be about 700 square feet, which means it will need a volume if we're trying to grow it in a location where there's no other place that can get soil of about 1,400 cubic feet. Thinking that's a lot of soil. This is some research from Walt Disney World parking lots, and it is the Magic Kingdom, but they don't have a magical view of how trees grow. They actually know how to grow big trees, and they do what's necessary for it to happen. So this is a sample of over 1,000 trees that are put in parking medians in the parking lots around Walt Disney World. So they've been in there since the 70s. And this is the lowest volume, 1,200 cubic feet, and this is the highest, so tish under 1,800 cubic feet. So for size, how big is that? So that's about 4 feet out here, about 10 feet wide, and about 45 feet that long. That's soil. That's not sheetrock. It's not finishing nails. It's not shingles. It's not pieces of 2x4. It's soil. And what they found in this is that over the course of those years, all of their trees got bigger. The ones that didn't have a catastrophic loss, like a storm. Anything that survived that didn't have a storm or some catastrophic loss or a truck backed into it survived, and they all got bigger. So again, they have it's the Magic Kingdom, but they don't have a magical view of how trees grow. Tom Smiley, this is a researcher with Bartlett Tree Labs. This is a urban plaza study he did, and he's looking at various kinds of ways to grow trees. And so this is the plaza. Each one of these trees is 10 by 10, a little water area or a little opening right here, and it's 2 foot deep. And surrounding each one of those volumes is geotextile and geogrid. So basically, the soil volume it has is 200 cubic feet per tree, and it's not getting any more than that. It's just getting that amount. Now, this is about 14 months in to this experiment. The cherry trees were taken out altogether out of the experiment. So you're going to, as you go forward, you're only going to see these elm trees right here. So 9 years later, So this is the various kinds of material that went in. Rock, stalite, which is the material used on green roofs, basically expanded shale. And they all those trees died, so they all came out. And then, or a mix of the two. So that was the purpose. So this is 9 years later, the canopies. So these are the elms. This is the stalite soil, so that's that basically lava rock. This is compacted, and these were new, so we'll discard those. And this is the gravel soil, okay? So what are the results? Over the course of the 9 years, the red line is the suspended pavement. The blue is the compacted green gravel soil, and the bottom one, the stalite soil, is the purple. This is diameter in inches. So the smallest one is about 5.5 inches. About that much. And the biggest one is about 8 inches, about that much. Okay. So over the course of 9 years, one put on 2.5 inches more caliper, or sorry, DBH. Here's the height. So from the smallest one, it's at about 17 feet, and the tallest one is about 25 feet. So 7 feet extra in 9 years. So not quite a foot a year. So we have stormwater. It has soil in it. We have lots of these small storms, the 1 inch, 24 hours, whatever it is, 1 1/4. It's about 1.2 here in Chicago. What can we do with it? Well, we can do simple things like curb cuts into tree openings, or we can have catch basins, and the bottom of the catch basin has a sump in it, so dirt can gather in there, and then it can be distributed. Or we can have rain leaders, so water coming off of roofs. So we'll have water there's two kinds of rain leaders on a typical roof. There's one that's the regular overflow, which is flush with the roof. And then there's the emergency, which is raised up about 1 inch above that or so, and that's for the big storms. So you can see in this case, we're putting just the small storms, the ones that are less than 1 inch in here. These ones are bypassing the system, but those are clean. The roof has been washed off by the other storm. So this is some stormwater research out of North Carolina State, Bill Hunt and Jonathan Page and Winston Ryan, or Ryan Winston. And so what we're looking at here is a suspended pavement system sitting on a subbase and having a pond line around it. And the purpose of that is that all of the water that's going in there is being accounted for. There's no stray water coming in. So that's the distribution pipe. This is the distribution pipe. That's the under drain. So that picks up the water when it's going out. And then this pond liner was put over the top again so that it could be sealed. And they both of these trees have 1/10 of an acre of watershed, which is about 200 feet that way and about 20 feet wide. So, and it's all impervious. So that's off the street. It goes into little catch basins. Here's a diagram of it. So it comes in here in this catch basin. So the reason I'm talking about that is we worked with Bill and Ryan on designing the system. So this is the catch basin. The water is sampled here, and then it goes through the treatment, and then it comes out this way and it's sampled again. And what happens? As a result of going through there's the two bars. I'm sorry, it's kind of confusing, but the dark one refers to the data from this experiment. The lighter colored one is the literature review. So what happens in green infrastructure for rain gardens? It's kind of it's a meta study. It's all put together, and what does that result in? So the dark ones in terms of total suspended solids, that's the dirty stuff. Nitrogen right here. You can see that pretty much all of them except for this one right here are greater in terms of that treatment. Phosphorus, kind of the same thing in terms of removal rates of phosphorus from the stormwater. Remember, 1 pound of stormwater produces 500 pounds of algae, phosphorus. So here's some of the things. So like I said, it was sealed off. So 1/10 of an acre. This is what we got. We got a reduction of 62% in terms of the amount of water that was going through the system. And we got 68% of the runoff was treated. So only about 30% of it was bypassing. And this is down in Wilmington, North Carolina. So this was over the course of 11 months, about 48 inches of rain. A lot of storms. It was over 50, almost 60 storms that were 1/10 of an inch or more. Why did I skip onto that? So new policy. All right. So we've been working on the Minnesota Stormwater Manual, and we've written 3 of the chapters. And it's the green roof portion, the bioinfiltration portion, and the urban trees. So one of the things is with these stormwater manuals is that every urban area that's above a certain size, 10,000, it used to be bigger, now they're getting smaller. A university campus can be a MS4, Municipal Storm Sewer System. You have to get a permit every 5 years. And we wanted to incentivize the process. And the main thing to remember about this is that it's a $200 hole and a $10 tree. That's the goal on this. So typically when the project is getting finished up, what's the thing that they're going to cut, right? They're going to cut can you put them in for $50 a piece? You know that conversation. So instead of having that, we tied this to the stormwater credit that they got up front in the project. If you put in a 1-to-2 relationship, so 1 in the air, 2 in the ground, for every tree that you put in as a 70% of mature size kind of tree. If you put that in, you get 100% stormwater credit right there today, starting today, forever on that catchment area. So it's an incentive to do it up front, because if it's not done up front, it's generally not going to happen, and the trees are going to look like those other trees. And American Forest said that the average tree in the largest municipalities in North America was about 13 years, street tree, about 13 years lifespan. I don't know about you all, but I didn't get into this to have trees that were like basically long-lived perennials. I wanted them to be 50, 100 years, that kind of lifespan. So that's what the Minnesota Stormwater Manual does, and it does it for those 3 things: interception, evapotranspiration, and infiltration. And here's the modelers. Bar Engineering worked with us on putting this little model together, which essentially you can calculate, this is my surface area, and these are the rains I'm getting, and it will populate it and tell you what you're getting for your credits. Trying to make it as simple as possible. So this is looking at the total suspended solids, so the dirt in the water, the particulate phosphorus, and then those are the 2 measures pretty much there that they're using. Dirt in the water and phosphorus. So those are the 2. We're the land of 10,000 lakes, a lot of fresh water. Phosphorus in our lakes means green lakes. People don't like green lakes. They like clear lakes. So finishing up. So this is these are cold climate examples except for one. And these are suspended pavement. This is in downtown Minneapolis. So from here back to here to the 0 lot line, there's soil underneath there. And the soil is 4 feet deep. This is pervious pavers, so the water can run off this parking lot in here and grow the trees. Because essentially this tree pit is acting like a rain garden. All the water's going into it. So this is what it looks like when it's opened up, and there's the utility pipes going in there. And you may have this experience. This has happened to me more than a few times. When we were talking about doing this system underground, the private utility folks were there, not the public utility folks. The private utilities as in electrical, cable, those kind of things. The water and the sewer way, way deep. And they were saying, there's no room down there. There's no room to put that stuff in there. There's just no room at all. You can't do it. I was like, what? There's no room, really? Really, there's no room? Yeah, there's no room. You can't do it. There's no room for you. So, anyways, this one is there's a fiber optic one here. One of those, that's a fiber optic, excuse me. And so I went and I talked to the guys from the fiber optic companies, and I said, so when you guys went to put your fiber optic cables in, what did they tell you? And they said there's no room. There's no room in there, there's no space. And then we went to city council, we proposed how we were going to string it between the buildings, and city council didn't like that at all. They said, no, you're going to put it underground. And then they opened it up, and there was space down there. Imagine that, there was space. So here is, you can see there's almost no room down there to put in anything. It's just all cluttered up, and you know, we're just pushing the limits here to put anything underground. Here's the growth rate so we've been monitoring them for about 4 years now. So this is an example. There's this big score of music on this wall behind there. And this is how it goes over a 4-year period. Essentially, it's growing at about a foot per year in height and, or width, excuse me. So this is 12.5, height grows 4 feet. The canopy diameter went from 5.6 to 11, almost doubled. And then you can see there's a lot of leaves on there. There's a lot more leaves. This is 2nd Avenue Streetscape in Calgary. Same thing, only there's curb cuts here. Here you can see the grates right there, and the water's coming in, and this is being monitored. The stormwater out of this is being monitored to see what is it doing. Now they only get 16 inches of rain a year. So it's actually, we're irrigating the system by putting the stormwater in here. So we're treating it as an asset that's coming from the roofs, it's coming from the street, it's coming from the sidewalks. And there was a utility bank in here. This is it. And now this is what you'll find sometimes is that a contractor will call and say, we found the fiber optic cable. How'd you find it? With the backhoe. So they found this with a backhoe. Luckily they didn't crack it, but there's electrical conduit in there. But that is unusual, and you can see in this case they're just working around it. Now, remember this thing? So Northern Europe, okay, there's only this amount of it that has those high intensity, short duration, infrequent storms. The rest of it is like this place here. This is in LIDL, or LIDL grocery store in England, where the water is coming off the roof, the parking lot, and the sidewalks, and draining into this area with these trees in them. And the parking lot has been, the bays have been made like this, so the water gathers down there in the pervious paving. And fortunately, I don't have better photographs of this project, but when they did this, now this is a cost again. When they did this, they didn't have to take up about 1/10 of an acre of their lot, so they would have lost about 20 parking stalls if they'd put in a pond. That's what they would have been required to do. They would have been required to put in a pond. Instead, they were able to basically utilize their entire lot and put in, there's 70 stalls in there, including the handicap access. So when somebody says, it's a lot of money to do that, well, the cost of land is not going down. So if you do these things, they will return. So that's what it looks like. That's pervious paving that you're seeing it drain into.